And this is just one more little push to put people out of their houses. I'm trying to think what it would accomplish for the city if it foreclosed and took these homes. What would the city wind up with? What would the city get by putting as many as 60 families out on the street? And it's hard for me to understand where the city is going on this. The homeowners have decided to form a more formalized community organization. We're setting up a public benefit corporation. And I think that part of the problem here is that there's been bluster on the part of the city. There's been frustration and venting on the part of the homeowners. But what I haven't heard is any negotiation or any sort of a sit down to try to work out some sort of a solution, short of filing foreclosure actions against these citizens. If it gets to litigation, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know that there will be some pushback. I know that people are going to want to look at things. They want to examine the jurisdictional issues involved with the CFT. They're going to want to look at where the money was spent. They're going to want to look at how come the city's drawing down money against these bonds when there's no appreciable way to pay it since the development is at a dead standstill. So I think the city may be opening a Pandora's box, and I would urge the city to not take this step just yet of hiring counsel for the purpose of foreclosing against people. Should the council hire counsel to represent it and represent the city? I believe it should. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we give a green light to the attorneys to immediately run out and file foreclosure actions. Let's try to sit down at the table and try to figure out some sort of a solution so that we can help people that are under financial stress remain in their homes and continue to pay the taxes rather than pushing them out of their homes and winding up with what? What are you going to wind up with if they get the house? What are you going to do with it? I think the mayor made a very good suggestion and trying to resolve the issue that we just heard on agenda item number 11. I think that's kind of interesting because that was exactly what I was going to suggest that the city and the citizens of this community do, is sit down and talk. Now, we don't need a mob scene, but there's no reason why the city, some persons on the staff and attorneys can't sit down with a few representatives from the homeowners along with council and try to work out some sort of a solution or ideas on how to help people remain in their homes and help the city collect the taxes from the people who are allowed to live there.
Thank you, sir. Jennifer, do you want to make some comments, or maybe the gentleman that we just hire?
I think Mr. Hunt would be the appropriate person to make the comments.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Hunt, please.
Members of the council, in setting up the community facilities district, the city followed state law and procedures in setting it up. In issuing the bonds, it also follows state law. And among the covenants that the city made with respect to the issuance of bonds, and the only way in which bonds could be sold in the was a covenant to enforce the collection of the special taxes and to foreclose, to initiate foreclosure proceedings within 90 days of July 1st of each year for all properties that were delinquent. That is an absolute legal obligation of the city. That's why this action to engage foreclosure counsel is before you this evening. It is a practice that has been followed with respect to community facilities districts in California for over 20 years, and it has been upheld by the courts. Nobody likes to foreclose on property owners, but it is, again, it was a condition of selling the bonds to the public markets to be able to raise the money. The monies from the CFDs were used for school impact fees, for city impact fees, and for certain improvements. The CFD was never intended to and never had sufficient money to fund all of the improvements for the development. It only funded a proportion of the improvements and the impact fees. And that's what it was intended to do, and that's where the monies were used. So the city doesn't really have an option with respect to foreclosure. If the city chooses not to foreclose, the city will have liability to the bondholders who bought the bonds. And as the lender that has put a receiver in place with respect to this project for phase 2, which remains uncompleted, that lender notified me through their representative today that they understand their obligation to bring all of the special taxes current, along with all of their other property taxes that are currently delinquent, within 30 days. And they also intend to coordinate with the city to determine the infrastructure within phase 2 that needs to be completed that is currently uncompleted. So that lender is going to take the responsibility to complete the improvements, the infrastructure improvements in phase 2. And they are planning on coordinating with the city in the next few weeks to determine what all those requirements are. So the city, again, is obligated not only to enforce it with respect to individual homeowners, but they're obligated by contract to enforce it with respect to any properties that's remain owned by the developer or any lender who financed the development. And I'd be happy to answer any specific questions you might have.
How this will affect the current homeowners?
Well, the current homeowners are obligated to pay the special taxes as well as their property taxes. If they do not do that, then the homes have to be brought up for foreclosure sale.
Okay, so if current homeowners is up to date with the tax and it's all paid, then they're not subject to a foreclosure, right?
Oh, absolutely. You're correct.
Okay. Is there anything else that, because I know that on the CFD it's different from, other property tax, but, everyone pays this property tax. Is there anything else, is there any other option that we have as far as working out a payment to settle this? Money that owed CFD? Is there any way you can work out with the individual to pay back before starting the foreclosure procedures?
Your contractual obligation was to initiate foreclosure proceedings within 90 days. If you had evidence that they were going to pay their current taxes, current special taxes on a current basis, and over a very relatively short term, chances are the bondholders would not sue the city in that situation. But if you were stretching it out over more than a few months, it's highly likely that the bondholders would come back and say, we bought the bonds based on your contractual obligation to enforce the covenants in the bond issue.
Okay, but homeowners that are interested in settling, to settle this problem, where do they go? Do they go to the county assessor or do they go to the city?
They go to the county tax collector,
Okay.
until foreclosure proceedings start.
Okay.
At the time foreclosure proceedings start, one of the first steps is that the delinquent special taxes are stripped from the tax roll.